Hi, this is Dr. Bertalan Meskó, the medical futurist, and today I want to talk about what having a genetic test is like.
Hey, you! That's right, you! Wouldn't you like to know the story of you? What makes you, you? DNA and Me is a genetic service that can help you find out exactly who your ancestors were. You might be surprised.
Ancestry DNA testing is at its peak. By the start of 2019, 26 million people had purchased genetic testing kits from companies like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. People go crazy about finding out trace percentages of their ancestry, and Airbnb now even recommends genetics-based vacations to places where our ancestors lived. But direct-to-consumer genetic testing can go way beyond that. It can help us tackle inherited diseases, it can teach us about what diet serves your body best, or it can warn you about how you will react to certain medications. It can be a goldmine of medical information that can help you live longer and healthier. As a geneticist and a physician, having done 7 genetic tests, I'm in a unique position to show you what these tests are all about. In this video, I would like to take you through the experience of genetic testing that goes beyond ancestry and show you what to expect and how to use the information to improve your life.
DNA and Me. Are you in? Hell f***ing yes, I'm in.
It all started with the Human Genome Project in the 1990s. It took more than a decade and $3 billion to accomplish its goals. But in 2003, we finally had the first human genome sequenced. Now you might wonder what it all means. The genome is the collection of our genetic information, 3.2 billion base pairs. It's the blueprint of every organism. Your cells work based on the instructions they get from that blueprint. The Human Genome Project deciphered most of these instructions and gained insight to what makes you, you. Skip ahead a few years and we had the first direct-to-consumer tests that cost close to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Skip a few more years ahead and genetic testing now costs only about $200. Let's see how they work. Genetic tests usually use a method called genotyping. Since 99.9% of the human DNA is the same in every one of us, genotyping doesn't look at all the 3.2 billion base pairs. It only focuses on a few hundred thousands of them that makes up that 0.1% that differentiate you from others. So if you want to use Ancestry.com, for example, they will look at some genetic variants to determine your lineage. But it's important to know their method of doing this. When they receive your sample, they will compare your results with reference populations in their database. But these databases are fairly new, mostly coming from that 26 million new consumers who bought in on the DNA testing craze over the last couple of years. So the results you are getting is not really a look into your family's past, but rather how strongly a few unique markers in your genes resemble different modern populations around the world. And the exciting trace percentages of ancestry from faraway lands? I'm sorry, but they are well within the margin of error and not conclusive at all. So, when Elizabeth Warren claims that her test results show that she is 0.09% to 1.5% Native American,
what do the facts say?
The facts suggest that you
absolutely have a Native American ancestor in your pedigree.
Okay. Well, maybe, maybe not. Look, it's still amazing that we achieved all that we can find and recognize genetic markers specific to certain populations around the world. And there are a lot of happy stories out there where ancestry testing help people find long-lost family members. But the same technology ancestry tests use to give you clues into your family's past can give you hints about your own future. Companies like Atlas Biomed, Futurist, or MyDNA use genotyping as well, but they focus on very different genetic variants. They can look for how susceptible you are to certain medications and what kind of diseases you have a risk for. As I said, they can be a gold mine of information. Which is why these tests can play a vital role in your health. Because if you have a higher risk for diabetes, for example, you can mitigate or intensify it with factors like sports and diet. But to pay attention and design your lifestyle in a way to prevent it, you need to know your risk factors first. As I've personally tried 7 different tests, I have a little experience with these tests, so I want to go through the process with you step by step. I want to show you how testing works, what to expect from the results, and what to do with the information you will get. So first things first, the sampling process. My latest test was from a company called Atlas Biomed, but genetic tests have a fairly similar sampling process. The company sends you a small tube that you need to fill up with a disgusting amount of saliva. And even though it sounds easy enough, it takes some time. The most important thing is that you can't eat, drink, smoke, or even use a chewing gum, at least for half an hour before taking the test. When you are ready, you screw the cap on the container, releasing the DNA-preserving liquid. You mix the materials and seal it. Since you are dealing with a biological sample, you have to do some administrative work too, and then you can send it back to the lab. Waiting is probably the worst part of it. I understand that shipping the package, conducting the genetic analysis, and uploading the results takes time, but in cases like this, people tend to be impatient. In Atlas Biomed's case, I had to wait for 4 weeks. Luckily, the company kept me posted about the progress of my analysis, and they also sent me a survey to assess my general lifestyle habits to get to know me better. I had to respond to questions about my height, weight, my diet, workout plan, and whether I smoke or not. So they tried to obtain every piece of detail about my lifestyle that cannot be mined from a genetic test. When the report of my results finally arrived, I certainly wasn't disappointed. It was available in a nicely designed, transparent, and very user-friendly online dashboard. Atlas Biomed promises to build up your risk profile for 19 multifactorial diseases and carrier status for common gene variants linked to 322 hereditary conditions. The company explains risk factors for each and every disease and also lists the studies based on which the team determines the risk score you have. They group the conditions into high risk, increased risk, average, moderate, or low risk categories. I could read a description about the diseases themselves, as well as how my genetic background and my lifestyle, based on the survey, could impact the given risk category. I consider myself lucky, as I'm not a carrier for any of the more than 300 conditions. However, I have to tell you beforehand that different companies use different technologies for analysis, and results may widely vary. The test provided by MyDNA showed that what kind of medications I have a sensitivity for. I learned that if I ever have to take a medication lowering cholesterol, I might get significant side effects. It's good to know. Another test from Futurist determined that I do have a genetic predisposition for obesity. Therefore, I must make sure that I follow the lifestyle I have now forever. Also, learning about my risk for deep vein thrombosis prompted my primary care physician to let me know that if I ever have an injury and must stay in bed for more than a day or so, we have to consider a medication against blood clots. Now you might ask, how many tests do I need to take to have a clear picture? Well, the answer can be different depending on what you're looking for, or the answer can be only one. While genotyping looks at few 100,000 base pairs in your DNA, genome sequencing goes for the whole 9 yards and looks at the old 3.2 billion. Genome sequencing is basically the same method that the Human Genome Project developed, but while back then it took 13 years and $3 billion to do it, nowadays you can order a test online for a few $100 more than a 23andMe test and get the results in about 2 months. The sampling process is pretty much the same as with most genetic tests. It requires a tube and a whole lot of saliva. It is sometimes performed from blood too, but the results are way more extensive than a regular genotyping test. I had my full genome sequenced at Dontel Labs, and when my 163 pages long report came back with my raw data, it was a bit intimidating. This was a thorough look at every secret of my DNA, and I'm gonna be honest, I was a bit worried what they might find. Fortunately, the report helped me interpret the data as they emphasized the likelihood of the risks. They included various illustrations and scales to visualize the results. And as there is a difference between having a risk based on one study or 50, they also divided the outcome based on the prevalence of evidence. But still, there was a mountain of information. And whether you are taking a genotyping test or do whole genome sequencing, it's highly recommended to get the assistance of a genetic counselor to put things into perspective and help you interpret complex and at times overwhelming results. The genome sequencing test from Dontel Labs had a hereditary cancer report, and naturally, I wanted to get to the bottom of my results. In the case of Dontel Labs, they connected me to a counseling team at DNAfeed.com whose services are HIPAA compliant, so information sharing was protected and encrypted. I was curious whether I had any significant risks that I should definitely be aware of and take into consideration when making lifestyle choices. I wanted to know whether I possess a genetic factor that I should always keep, in the back of my mind. The clinician called me by saying I don't have any mutations of the known genes that may substantially increase my risk of hereditary cancer, for example, BRCA. The counselor mentioned the slightly increased risks for melanoma and colorectal cancer, but also explained the steps to take to prevent them: proper skin protection from sun exposure, routine controls with a dermatologist, and getting the recommended screening with colonoscopies to catch any potential tumors early, or at least as early as possible. The counselor also told me that I have a factor V Leiden mutation that gives me a slightly increased tendency to form abnormal blood clots that can block blood vessels. But the counselor added the much needed context here. This is a common mutation that 3 to 8% of people may have, and most people with this mutation never develop clots. And that's exactly why you need counseling. To understand your results deeper, to put them in context, and to know how to adjust your lifestyle to prevent the inherited risks. I'm not gonna lie, it could be a scary experience to know this much about yourself. But I also believe that now that we have the technology, we shouldn't bury our heads in the sand. We can change our lifestyle to be in harmony with our genetic code. Because if we know what dangers lurk in our future, we can take steps to limit their risks or prevent them entirely. Because as the saying goes, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. The amazing part of this whole DNA testing craze is that these are still very early days. Think about it. 20 years ago, our DNA was a cipher we couldn't crack. Then it took us 13 years and $3 billion to finally understand it. And now anyone can order a test package online, and in 4 weeks, they can have their personal genome sequenced. The single most valuable medical information a person can obtain. So where is this all heading? A major genetics company, Illumina, already announced that their new machine can decipher an entire human genome in 1 hour. They also expect prices to continue to fall to a place where it can be affordable for anyone. And with that, one day genome sequencing can join our most basic diagnostic tests, being as simple as a blood or urine test. Unfortunately, as of now, healthcare is not ready for mass genome sequencing. In my home country, Hungary, you can't even add the data to your medical records. But hopefully in the future, healthcare systems around the world will recognize the potential of genome sequencing and incorporate it. But until then, it's up to the patient to work with their general physician and their genetic counselor to figure out what to do with the information and to create a preventive plan. Further down the line, things will get really exciting. Now we know how to read our blueprint, but there is still so much that we don't know about our genes. But as we slowly reveal their individual roles in our health and how they correlate to certain diseases and conditions, well, it will bring a revolution in precision medicine too. And to look even further into the future, one day, perhaps, we can use all that data to even edit our genome and get rid of humanity's most ancient maladies. If you like this episode and you would like to hear more about genetic testing, subscribe here.